When the jury walked back into that federal courtroom in Los Angeles, no one spoke. The air felt heavy, not just with tension, but disbelief. A man who once promised to change the world through science was about to hear the words that would end his freedom. We find the defendant, Serhat Gumrukcu, guilty of murder-for-hire conspiracy. For a moment, even the cameras seemed to stop breathing. Because this wasn't just another conviction. This was the fall of a millionaire biotech genius, a man who moved through international circles, charmed investors, and claimed to hold the key to curing diseases. And yet, behind the white lab coats and corporate boardrooms, there was rot. A secret so dark, it left a father of 6 dead in the snow. It's a story of brilliance, greed, and the quiet ways desperation turns to violence. Of a man who thought he could outsmart everyone, until justice caught up. Today, we step into the world of Serhat Gumrukcu. But before the courtroom, before the guilty verdict, there was a deal. A promise of millions. And a phone call that would start a chain reaction leading to murder. January 6, 2018. The snow was falling gently over Vermont when Gregory Davis heard a knock at his door. He opened it and saw 2 men dressed like U.S. Marshals. They said he was wanted for questioning in a federal investigation. His wife watched as they placed him into an SUV. It drove away. She never saw him alive again. In a town where nothing like this ever happens, the quiet had been broken by a crime born thousands of miles away. Serhat Gumrukcu was known as a prodigy, the kind of man who walked into a room and made people believe anything was possible. Born in Turkey in the mid-1980s, he showed an early fascination with medicine and science. Those who knew him described him as brilliant, charming, and relentlessly ambitious. He could hold a conversation about virology, venture capital, and quantum mechanics, all before lunch. By his early 30s, he had moved to California and co-founded Inokian Biosciences, a biotech company that claimed to be developing revolutionary cures for HIV, hepatitis, and even cancer. Investors lined up. Shares climbed. And Serhat's reputation grew. But like so many stories that glitter in the beginning, the shine didn't last. Behind the white lab coats and polished press releases, there were quiet whispers about fake credentials, about lawsuits, about deals that didn't quite add up. Serhat was no licensed medical doctor. He was self-taught, persuasive, and had a way of dressing speculation as certainty. But to the outside world, he looked unstoppable. The kind of genius who would make investors rich and scientists proud. And one of those investors was Gregory Davis, a family man from Vermont. Gregory wasn't a big city financier. He was practical, straightforward. The kind of man who built success on hard work, not promises. When Serhat came to him with an opportunity in an oil deal, Davis believed it could change his fortune. Millions were on the line. He signed in good faith, trusting that the young scientist was as legitimate as he claimed. But it was all a lie. The oil deal collapsed. The money vanished. And Gregory Davis started asking questions, loud, public questions. He told friends he had discovered fraud, that he was ready to report Serhat to federal authorities, that he wasn't going to let it go. When a man with everything to lose meets another who refuses to stay quiet, something dangerous brews in between. Serhat wasn't just facing financial ruin. He was facing exposure, the unraveling of a web he had spent years spinning. And somewhere in that spiral, he made a decision that would end a man's life and destroy his own. The deal that brought Gregory Davis and Serhat Gumrukcu together was supposed to be simple. A short-term investment with a huge payout. On paper, it was an oil venture with international potential. But in reality, it was smoke. A fabrication built on layers of shell companies and false promises. Gregory, a man of spreadsheets and honesty, started to see cracks. Invoices didn't match. Phone calls weren't returned. And the more he pressed, the more evasive Serhat became. By late 2017, the relationship had soured. Gregory began telling people close to him that something was deeply wrong. That the genius doctor from California might be running a scam. He even told one friend that if anything ever happened to him, they should look into Serhat. And then, it did happen. On a freezing night in January 2018, A man wearing a U.S. Marshal's jacket knocked on Gregory Davis's front door. His wife later recalled that the visitor's voice was calm, official, and convincing. He told Gregory he was being taken in for questioning related to federal charges. Gregory didn't resist. He grabbed his coat, stepped outside, and that was the last time his family saw him alive. Hours later, his body was found by the side of a snowy road. He had been shot multiple times, execution style. There were no signs of robbery, no struggle, just a clean, professional kill. Vermont doesn't see murders like this. Not quiet, small towns, not men like Gregory Davis. For investigators, it was an immediate puzzle. Who would want him dead? And why disguise the killer as a U.S. Marshal? Detectives combed through his records, interviewed neighbors, and followed every thread until they stumbled upon one name that kept resurfacing. Serhat Gumrukcu, the man with millions in biotech and a fortune to lose if Davis exposed him. But there was a problem. Serhat was in California, hundreds of miles away, attending meetings, flying on private jets, charming investors. He had an alibi. Or at least, it looked that way. What investigators didn't know yet was that this crime wasn't random. It was the start of a carefully orchestrated murder-for-hire plot, planned with precision, funded with money, and executed by people who thought they could bury the truth in the snow. And yet, truth has a way of melting through even the coldest lies. For months, investigators worked in the dark. No eyewitnesses. No clear motive that held up in court. Just a murdered man, a staged arrest, and a trail that didn't seem to lead anywhere. Until it did. They began piecing together fragments. Phone records, bank transfers, rental car logs. Each one revealing a small corner of a much larger picture. That's when a name surfaced: Jerry Banks. Banks was no federal agent. He was a hired gun from Colorado. A man with a history of impersonating law enforcement, and a knack for getting his hands dirty when the price was right. Through meticulous detective work, investigators tied Banks to a vehicle rented near Davis's home on the night of the murder. Surveillance cameras caught glimpses of it moving along rural Vermont roads in the hours before Davis vanished. A coincidence? Maybe. But then came the cell phone pings. Banks's phone, the same one he used to call his alleged employer, was moving in perfect sync with Davis's final moments. And then, just as suddenly, it went silent. When the FBI confronted Banks, he didn't say much. But behind that silence, investigators found something louder. A string of money transfers linked back to an intermediary. That man was Berk Arate. Arate wasn't a random middleman. He was Serhat Gumrukcu's close associate, a Turkish national living in California. And, as prosecutors would later argue, the bridge between the biotech millionaire and the hitman who pulled the trigger. Through Arate, the payment trail took shape. Thousands wired in cryptic transactions, messages coded as projects, funding, and consultations. But when agents decrypted the context, the story they saw wasn't about business. It was about murder. And this was the turning point. A case that had once looked like a rural tragedy was now unraveling into a cross-state conspiracy. One that stretched from Vermont's quiet snowfields to the corporate boardrooms of Los Angeles. Investigators realized something chilling. This wasn't the act of an impulsive man. It was planned, coldly, methodically, and it was all done to silence one voice. Gregory Davis, the man who dared to speak up, the man who believed truth could stand against deceit. By 2021, the investigation had evolved from local police work to a full-scale federal pursuit. What began as a murder mystery in snowy Vermont was now a sprawling web of fraud, deceit, and money laundering, stretching from California to Turkey. And at the center of it all was Serhat Gumrukcu. The biotech entrepreneur had built his empire on big dreams and bigger promises. Enochian Biosciences was thriving, its stock climbing, its research drawing media attention. Investors believed in the visionary scientist. But behind those glossy press releases, federal agents were quietly building a case. The FBI's financial forensics team began mapping wire transfers. What they found was astonishing. Money from accounts tied to Serhat's businesses had been funneled through shell entities, and then dispersed to associates connected to Narrated and, eventually, Jerry Banks. Each transaction looked harmless in isolation. A consulting fee here, a reimbursement there. But together, they formed a pattern too deliberate to ignore. Meanwhile, Inokiant's board of directors started feeling the tremors. Whispers began spreading about irregularities, missing records, and unverified credentials. When journalists started asking questions, Serhat's charm began to fade. He stopped appearing at public events. He avoided interviews. And behind closed doors, he was lawyering up. The fall of a man like Serhat Gumrukcu isn't loud. It's slow, almost elegant, like a curtain closing on a play you didn't realize was ending. While the world still saw a biotech pioneer, the FBI saw a fugitive of truth, a man accused of orchestrating murder to protect a lie. And in May 2022, the illusion finally shattered. Agents arrested Serhat at Los Angeles International Airport. He was calm, poised, still playing the part, the misunderstood genius. But this time, there was no audience left to convince. Prosecutors charged him with murder for hire and conspiracy to commit interstate murder. His associates, including Burke Narrated and Jerry Banks, faced similar indictments. The biotech empire he had built, the millions he had amassed, all began to crumble under the weight of one truth. Ambition had turned to obsession, and obsession had turned deadly. It's easy to admire ambition, the drive to create, to innovate, to change the world. But when ambition loses its conscience, it stops building and starts destroying. For Gregory Davis, the price of truth was his life. For Serhat Gumrukcu, the cost of silence was his soul. By 2025, the trial of Serhat Gumrukcu had become one of the most closely watched cases
plotting
in
a
America.
murder for hire in
A collision
Vermont
of wealth,
back in 2018
science,
has been found
and
guilty of all
cold-blooded
charges.
greed. Reporters filled
Serhat
the courtroom.
Gumrukcu has
The
been on trial
biotech
for
world
5 weeks
held its
now
breath.
for the 2018
And for
murder
the family
Greg
of
Davis
Gregory
of Danville,
Davis,
Vermont. In
justice
Danville,
felt both
prosecutors
long
say that
overdue
Davis
and painfully
threatened to
close.
expose
The
Gumrukcu
prosecution
to the
laid out its
FBI for
case
his
in
involvement
meticulous
in a
detail.
fraudulent
Wire
oil
transfers,
deal.
burner
In the past few
phones,
weeks, the federal
encrypted
government
messages,
brought on several
each
witnesses,
piece forming a
including
bridge
three men who
between a
admitted to
brilliant
their role in
entrepreneur
the
and a
murder
murdered
scheme,
man.
including Gumrukcu's
Witnesses described
employee,
Serhat's temper, his
Burke
paranoia, his
Narrated.
fear that Davis would
Says
expose his fraudulent oil scheme,
ordered him
and
to
they
find
painted a
someone to
picture
kill Davis.
not of a scientist,
Narrated went
but
to
of a
his
man
friend,
desperate to protect
Aaron
the illusion
Etheridge,
of
who
success.
brought in a Colorado
On the defense
man by
side,
the name of Jerry
Serhat's
Banks.
attorneys tried
Banks
to
admitted
argue
to
that he had been
shooting and
framed,
killing Davis back
that
in
associates had
2018.
acted independently.
Everyone but
But the money
Gumrukcu
trail
had
told a
pled
story
guilty.
that words could not erase.
He now faces life in
When the
prison.
verdict finally came, the courtroom went still. Guilty. Guilty of
The man
murder for
accused
hire.
of plotting a
Guilty
murder
of
for hire
conspiracy
in
to
Vermont
commit
back in
murder.
2018
For
has
a
been
moment,
found guilty of all
time
charges.
seemed to stop.
Serhat
sat
Gumrukcu
motionless,
has
the
been on
same
trial
calm
for
mask
5
he
weeks
had
now
worn
for
for
the
years.
2018 murder
But this
of
time,
Greg Davis
there was
of
no
Danville,
charm
Vermont,
left
in
behind it.
Danville.
He was
Prosecutors
no
say that
longer
Davis
the visionary
threatened to
scientist,
expose
no
Gumrukcu
longer
to
the
the
investor's
FBI for
dream,
his involvement
just a man
in
facing
fraudulent
life
oil
behind
deal.
bars,
Over the past
trapped
few
in
weeks,
the
the federal
empire
government
he
brought
had
on
built out
several
of lies.
witnesses, including three
And for
men who
Gregory
admitted to their
Davis's
role
family,
in the murder scheme,
justice didn't
including
bring joy,
Gumrukcu's
but
employee,
peace. A
Burke
quiet, steady
Narrated.
peace that comes
He
not
says
from victory, but from knowing the
ordered him
truth
to find
has finally
someone to
been
kill
spoken
Davis.
aloud. In
Narrated
the end,
went to his
this
friend,
story isn't just about
Aaron
a murder for
Etheridge, who
hire.
brought in a
It's about the
Colorado
fragile
man by
balance
the name
between
of Jerry
genius
Banks.
and greed.
Banks admitted to
How
shooting
ambition,
and killing
when
Davis back in
unanchored by
2018.
conscience, can turn
Everyone but
innovation into
Gumrukcu had
destruction.
pled guilty.
Serhat Gumrukcu
He now
dreamed
faces
of
life
curing
in prison.
diseases. Gregory Davis dreamed of building a future for his family. But somewhere between
The man
those
accused
dreams,
of plotting a
lies were
murder for
told,
hire in
and a life
Vermont
was
back in
lost.
2018
And
has
maybe
been found
the
guilty of all
greatest tragedy
charges.
of all is
Serhat
that it didn't have to end
Gumrukcu
this way.
has been on trial for
For
5
every
weeks
life
now for
built
the
on
2018
deceit,
murder of
there's
Greg
another
Davis
built
of
on
Danville,
truth.
Vermont. In Danville,
And truth,
prosecutors
no
say
matter
that
how
Davis
long it takes,
threatened to expose
always finds its
Gumrukcu
way
to
to the
FBI
surface.
for his involvement
Candle
in
justice
a
for
fraudulent
Gregory
oil
Davis.
deal. Over the
The
past few
truth
weeks,
melts
the federal
even the
government
coldest
brought on
lies.
several witnesses.